So yeah, I'm Daniel Iversen. I'm part of the Dropbox Australia team, where I lead the solution architects. So today I want to talk to you about how we drive sustained innovation at Dropbox and how essentially we build what's probably the world's largest collaboration network. Now, there's a couple of reasons why I'm really excited to be here, especially with you guys, right? So at Dropbox, when we do talks, sometimes we'll ask the audience who uses Dropbox, and we get a pretty good response rate, especially in Australia, where 1 in 2 people have a Dropbox account. But in this audience, I think the statistic will be a little bit different, so I'm going to ask it the other way around. So by the show of hands, who of you have never used Dropbox before? Okay, so for those 2 people, come and see us afterwards, okay? Because we want to chat with you guys. No, but seriously, like, we really built the product for you guys, okay? So people who need that creative freedom, right? Who work across boundaries, across companies with lots of high-volume information and who really, collaborate intensely with their entire ecosystem, right? So the product is really built for you in the media, creative, tech, digital industries, okay? Secondly, I'm excited because I think we kind of share a common journey and a common challenge, and that is how we drive sustained innovation in our organizations, okay? And that's really the key question, right? How to unlock sustained innovation inside of your organizations. Because for Dropbox, as a tech company, it's really the lifeblood of what we need to do, especially as a niche player where we're essentially competing with every one of the biggest software companies out there. It's really sustained innovation that doesn't only keep us growing, but actually keeps us alive and keeps us competitive. Okay, so that's what I want to talk about today, is kind of the recipe that we have found over the years that works for us. And of course, it's evolving, okay? But there's a lot of good things there that has sort of been consistent throughout our journey, right? But it's hard, right? So no matter what kind of research you follow and what kind of angle you take to it, the challenge of sustained innovation has a very low success rate, especially in mature organizations. And intellectually, it makes sense, right? It's like, the larger the organization is, the older it is, the harder it is to kind of stay on top of your game, right? You get complacent, you don't want to take as much risk, you might have a lot of bureaucracy, you've got the innovator's dilemma. Okay, Dropbox, we just announced last week, we've hit $1 billion in revenue as the fastest growing SaaS company in the world ever, and you don't want to risk that, right? So how do you experiment, how do you continue to innovate without imposing a lot of risk? So that's kind of what I want to talk about. And hopefully, you'll find some of the information useful. You might find it interesting, or it might make you think about, things that you could do in your own organizations, okay? So first, I want to cover off, what are the approaches we see that companies take around innovation, okay? So first, and no company will admit to doing this, right? But we see the ivory tower kind of approach to innovation, where innovation comes from the top down in a small company or comes from a specific department in larger companies, right? The example of the MD, not just setting out the strategy, because we do believe, of course, strategy comes from the top, but sets out all of the ideas and how these ideas need to be executed on. Or in larger companies, where you find that it's the research and design department that's responsible for innovation, or it's the innovation incubator and those kinds of things. And the problem with that approach, obviously, is that the people that are responsible for innovation, it also means that there's people that are not, right? And so you're not really capitalizing on the talent that you have within your company. So we really believe that approach doesn't work. Then there's something that sounds a little bit more collaborative and crowdsourced, right? Which is the suggestion box kind of model to innovation, right? Where employees have an opportunity to share their great ideas, right? Now, we believe that doesn't really work either, right? I've literally seen in large companies, they literally have a physical suggestion box, right? Where you drop a piece of paper with your great idea in. But whether it's a physical box, or whether it's a page on the internet, or whether it's an email alias, that doesn't work either, because you're essentially saying that the people who come up with ideas aren't the same ones that are responsible for researching, defining, and executing on those ideas. So you're really missing a lot of opportunity there too. So at Dropbox, the way we do it is probably a little bit more akin to making a delicious soup, right? So we take all of these ingredients that we find really works in terms of creating an engine and a culture of innovation. We put it in this delicious broth and we stir the pot. Okay, so I want to share this recipe with you of what we do. So there's 3 main areas that I'll go through. The first one is around explicit company values, right? We think that that's the most important thing, right? That's the map, that's the clarity, and that really goes hand in hand with the vision of the company. It's under the umbrella of that you can actually empower people to have creative freedom and help you drive innovation and creativity inside of the company. Then the second piece is going to be around context, right? It's only with the right information and the right insight that you can actually empower people to drive progress in your company and everybody stay on the same page without deviating off the rails. And then last but not least, we'll talk about expectations, right? Because without expectations, there's just no guarantee of what you're going to get. So as far as company values go, it's probably one of the largest contributor to the success of Dropbox. And we have an extremely strong culture within the company, right? And every company has a culture, but unless you put a lot of hard work into creating and nurturing that culture the way you want it to be, and you hire for those attributes, you're going to get an accidental culture. So it takes a lot of work. Dropbox is probably the only company I've ever worked for where every employee knows the company mission by heart and knows all of the company values, okay? So I'm going to share with you what they are, because if you're a user of the Dropbox product, you'll probably recognize where it comes from, and also we are going to relate them to some of the things I'm going to talk about in a second. So the first company value at Dropbox, and the most important thing, is to be worthy of trust. Okay? And normally, we talk about that in the context of our users, right? Because we are the custodians of the most important information for hundreds of millions of people around the world. And so we always, every day, want to remind ourselves that we need to be worthy of that trust. Your privacy, your information, the way we treat you, and the way we build the product. That is the most important thing for us. But it's also how we deal with each other in the company, and how we can create an open and immersive culture around innovation, which you'll see in a second. The second company value is we, not I, right? Especially in a space where Dropbox is, that's niche, that's highly competitive. You know, we know that only great teams win. And so what this means is that no matter how smart you are or how great people we hire, it's about putting your ego aside and playing as a team, right? Teams win. The third company value is aim higher, right? Always keep pushing the boundary. Don't accept the status quo, right? We can always do more. We can do better. And the fourth company value is not far apart from that. It's called sweating the details. And this really speaks to the craftsmanship that we expect from everybody, right? We can only continue to grow and be this successful if everybody really performs at their best. The last company value might seem a little bit silly. It's cupcake. And it's not even just the word cupcake, it's actually the picture of a cupcake, okay? And so this means a few things for us. On one hand, it's a reminder of not taking ourselves too seriously, okay, in light of what I just discussed. But it's also, like, everybody likes cupcakes, right? They're delightful, they're delicious, and that's the kind of experience we want to give to our users. We want to evoke an emotional response. And so that's really what it's about. We want to create this special experience with Dropbox. And it's also, again, how we treat each other internally. Okay? It might sound a little bit like a cult, but we actually have a term that is called whether we are being cupcakey or not. Okay? So that's the company values. Everybody knows them. Everybody tries to work by those values. And we grade each other on those values. We peer review each other on those values every 6 months and every year. Okay? And then every department then has values that really dovetails nicely into those company values. So if we look at the design department, for example, it all starts with get to simple, right? So the success of Dropbox and the virality of Dropbox in a large part was because the product was so simple to use. I reckon all of you, or 99% of you, use Dropbox without reading any manuals, right? Without somebody telling you how to use it. It's quite intuitive, like the iPhone. And we believe that most problems can be boiled down to their simplest form and have a really simple, elegant solution, right? And that's really what software as a service has also done to the world, right? It's sort of really brought a pragmatism into how we build software and focusing on the business value and not the features and functions, okay? Secondly, when we build a product, it's about building something really useful and really valuable. Right? So that's the second design principle. We are not just here to make another dollar of the world. We're here to simplify the way people work. And we believe that, and we build a product with the user in mind first. And there's other values too. And from an engineering perspective, it's all about mastering our craft. Okay, it's about focusing on impact, and it's about owning issues. And I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. The second important area to drive sustained innovation is around context, right? Only with the right values and with the right information and insights can people actually be able to make the right decisions and drive forward fast and build new things, right? So at Dropbox, it becomes more complicated the bigger you get and the more complex your situation becomes. So obviously, all the employees use Dropbox, and it was originally built to solve our own problems, right? The problem of working better together. And so we all use internal versions of the Dropbox build. We get a new version every day, and we test it, and we're passionate about it. And if something doesn't quite work, we get really upset about it, and we kind of empathize with the users that way. But then, as we grow quite large, and as we're now starting to sell to large enterprises, there's just some context that we can't naturally have individually, right? So the way we create information, the way we research, the way we find out about users' needs, and the way we share information then becomes really important, right? So at Dropbox, we have a culture of extreme transparency and openness, okay? So all of our roadmaps and most sensitive information is open for every one of our 1,500 employees. Small things that has a huge impact, like our calendars are all open, right? You can go into the CEO's calendar, you can see what he's up to, okay? Also, in terms of really kind of creating a flatter organization as you're growing large, we do things like every 2 weeks, we got an all-hands meeting with our CEO, right, and his staff, where we talk about what's going on in the business, what's new, what's the risk, what's the issues, what's on all of our minds, right? And in that way, we can all sort of have that shared consciousness and context to be able to innovate in parallel at a very fast pace. The third thing is really around expectations, okay? So anyone who's managed anyone before, or in fact anyone who's really worked with anyone, we all know that unless you set clear expectations, you don't really know what you're going to get, right? And it's kind of a two-way street between the company and the people, right? So because we're all really people at the end of the day. And so the number one thing here is really that we believe that innovation is 80% bottoms up. As I said earlier, strategy comes from the top, but really that ongoing innovation and creativity comes from the bottom, right? Comes from all the employees. And so it's not just a luxury, it's an expectation that we've got to live up to that rate of innovation. The second thing is about owning it, right? So Dropbox has a strong culture of accountability, and I think that's missing in a lot of places, right? So when an engineer writes a piece of code, we don't just expect them to write the piece of code. We want them to own the outcome, even though we're all interdependent on each other. So what it means is if you're building a new feature, did you do enough research? Do we have the data? Once it's built, did we get the outcome? What was the adoption rate? What was the user feedback? What was the retention, right? So that accountability is really important if you want to drive sustained innovation. And that goes throughout the company, right? So every quarter, each person's key objectives and requirements are out in the open for everyone to see. And we can see that it all aligns with the broader mission. You can go in and see what's Drew's, our CEO's, what's his objectives for this quarter? What about our VP of sales? What about my peers? What about my people? What about my colleagues? Right? And that creates this really special consciousness where everybody's on the same page. But it's a little bit scary to have that much transparency, and it takes a while to get there. Thirdly, it's about being worthy of trust again, right? So there's that mutual expectation about what's required of us in this relationship and to be able to drive this model forward. And then last but not least, we are putting on a lot of programs and events to explicitly create an environment of creative freedom, to really shock our nervous system and remind ourselves and really kind of enable that innovation that's needed. And I want to talk about one of these events that's very special to us. So it's a very special 120 hours every year at Dropbox, and it's called Hack Week, okay? So Hack Week is where everyone in the company, apart from a few people who are there to kind of keep the lights on, where we all work on projects that are self-organized, self-selected, self-managed, that we are passionate about, that impacts Dropbox's situation, right? It might be that you want to build something, a new feature in the product. It might be that you want to fix a process. It might be that you want to do good in the community via charity. Whatever kind of affects our environment, okay? And everybody stands behind it. We've got 1,500 people. Last year, we had more than 500 projects. And I want to talk about the 5 key things that makes Hack Week very special. And I think a lot of companies can probably pick some of these ideas and use as well. So number 1, Hack Week is really an immersive environment. Okay? So for that week, you're not working on your day jobs. You're not really allowed to work on your day jobs, right? So you'll see we don't respond to the same kind of emails, we don't go to the same kind of meetings, and so on. Right? We immerse ourselves in the projects that we've come up with or that we've selected. We work across the globe, across different lines of business, and sometimes we haven't met the person before. The only commonality is that we are passionate about this one thing together, which creates a really special environment and a long-lasting impact on the culture. Secondly, Hack Week is really defined by the impossible. So what I mean here is that Silicon Valley has kind of popularized the idea of hackathons and things like that, right? But oftentimes it's very easy to have a lofty idea and then tell yourself, nah, it's too hard, I can't do it, it's only a day. But once you have a week with a team that's as passionate as you about solving this particular issue, then suddenly you can do crazy things. And suddenly the impossible becomes possible. And that's really what drives us. So in this example here, we've got a guy 2 years ago called Ben. And so Ben Newhouse, he had this frustration, right, that a lot of us shared and a lot of our customers shared, where he had all of this information in Dropbox, right? But none of it fit on his computer, right? The hard drive was too small. And that kind of just happens, right? And it happened to a lot of us, and you run out of space, and you've got to manage what goes where and things like that. And so he thought, that doesn't make sense, right? The cloud has evolved, but the personal computers have kind of been stuck in this time capsule for decades in a way. So he thought, wouldn't it be cool? Wouldn't it be Dropbox's responsibility to create an infinite hard drive for everybody? Right? And so he got other engineers excited about the thing, and we've been working on it now for a couple of years. And last week, we launched something called Smart Sync, which is the result of Project Infinite. And essentially what it is an infinite hard drive for everybody. So now with Dropbox Business, what you can do is you can actually have terabytes of information in Dropbox. You can see and feel it all on your computer, no matter how small the hard drive is. But Dropbox will only sync and take up space for the information that's actually truly needed. Right? So completely new thinking, and really defined by something that we all thought probably was impossible. Number 3, Hack Week is really an intense act of learning, right? So you're working on something that's not your day job. You're working with people from a different context, from a different line of business. You're exploring, you're investigating, how does this work? And that learning is really very much related to innovation, and that has a long-lasting effect on the culture way beyond, the Hack Weeks. So this is a picture of Aaron. I can't remember what his Hack Week project was, but the picture kind of says it all, right? And this is kind of what you see when you go to the Dropbox offices during Hack Week. Everybody's just super focused around the particular projects that they're working on and that they're super passionate about. Fourthly, Hack Week defies the status quo, right? So nothing is sacred. You can question anything and everything. There's no sacred cows. So here we've got Daniel Horn, one of our engineers. He was inspired. I don't know if you guys have seen the HBO sitcom Silicon Valley, right? It's quite a hilarious comedy about Silicon Valley, venture capitalists, startups, and all that sort of stuff. And it's funny because it's a parody, but it's also very true. And obviously, the space is a little bit crazy. So it's hilarious. But in that show, they create this fictitious algorithm called Pied Piper around compressing media. And so Daniel thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could actually do this for real? Right? At Dropbox, we've got billions and billions of photos and images that we're hosting for all of our users, right? And some of these file formats hasn't changed for decades. And so we're getting to the point where we're questioning everything. We're questioning file formats, we're questioning file types, we're questioning how the internet works and everything. And so Daniel got 12 other engineers super excited about the idea of creating a real-world Pied Piper, and that's what they did. Right? So now they've created this system where we can compress in a lossless way photos to about 22%. You might go, yeah, what's the big deal with that? But if you're serving billions and billions of photos, then suddenly you're talking about millions of dollars that will be saved. And you're also talking about a better environment, right? Less storage means less hard drive, less power cooling, etc. So we're really excited about empowering to be able to do those kinds of crazy things. And so we open source this. We know that Flickr and other large cloud companies are looking at, hey, we should all be using this, right? So that's really cool. And last but not least, Hack Week is really a shared act of creative freedom, right? It's not just like it's one person or one team doing this. It's the whole company doing it, right? Which means that it really changes the culture in a very deep way. And after people's first hack week, they really have this wondrous, internalization of, wow, I can really make stuff happen, right? So it's such a special time for us. And so it's really around changing things, empowering people, enabling it, and rewarding it. And it's not just an academic exercise. We know scientifically that this is what drives a lot of innovation for us. And so about 30% of our product innovation actually comes from Hack Week, right? So it has a real tangible impact on our roadmap. So here's an example of a Hack Week project. A team thought, Dropbox, great for sharing files. I can click one button, I get a link, I can share a file. Why can't we receive files, right? I want one link, one click, and then receive a file from someone else. And so they built what they call Drops, which is now called File Requests. It's been out for more than a year or so, and it's the ability to receive files via Dropbox. And so now it's being used by thousands and thousands of customers, from marketing departments requesting proposals from their agencies, from school teachers requesting assignments from their students, right? All because these people had a great idea and was able to actually act on it. But not everything goes into the product, right? So the team that was working on camera uploads wanted to stress test the new protocol that they had developed, right? And so they thought, okay, we want to test it on a really high latency, low bandwidth kind of environments. So they thought, well, why don't we send Dropbox to space, right? And so they basically built a Dropbox app in space, right? Suffice to say, obviously, we haven't built a product around that. There's no Dropbox in space, but certainly a lot of the innovation and the thought there goes into the broader sense of, developing our sync engine, right? And keeping that the fastest and most reliable sync engine on the planet. Right? So all of this matters in so many different ways. So what I want to show you here to finish with before I kind of summarize is a new product that we launched last week. You might have seen the video around the place, and it's for Dropbox Paper. But there's something to this, okay? So firstly, just to recap, if you haven't had a chat with us already, Dropbox Paper is really a content-based collaboration tool, right? So it's a digital canvas for you to create content with teams, with your customers, with everyone. Okay? But what's really cool is that now that we've talked about how we innovate at Dropbox, how we think about teamwork, and how we think about creativity, if you now listen to this paper video, you will see that Dropbox Paper essentially is the technology manifestation of how we believe that great work is created. Okay? So have a listen to Dropbox Paper.
It's about people working together in a more human and connected way, because that's how people grow the best ideas. That's Paper from Dropbox. It's just what's needed to keep everything moving. Everyone adding and creating together from wherever they are. It's staying connected and keeping each other going, with comments that feel like conversations, or fist bumps, or whatever that one is, so that an idea can inspire an image that sparks a look and feel, and even more ideas about music, and motion, and color that all make an idea into an even better version of itself. That's why we made Paper, because when people work together in a more human and connected way, they grow better ideas. That's Paper from Dropbox.
So as you can see, Dropbox Paper really embodies a lot of our values and cultures and beliefs around innovation and creativity. We launched it last week. It's available today. It's free. If you go to paper.dropbox.com or dropbox.com/paper, you can get it right now. And so to summarize, if I had to distill everything we just talked about, right? So I would say, if you're looking to create a more creative, innovative environment, start with the values, right? That's really the map that guides everybody, right? Write it down, internalize it, everybody be clear on it. And then really believe in innovation from the bottom and create an environment where people can innovate, right? Where you empower and reward it. And a lot of the times, it really requires you to create a very open and transparent culture. So with that, we're done, and I think we have maybe time for one question, but thank you very much for your time.